Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and today we are going to look at those numbers and letters, the code on a model rocket, figure out what they mean. To lead off, I should say that I'm going to be bumping through a bunch of different sites here, vendors, and just generalized sources of knowledge. So, all credit due to them. This is from Apogee, Tim Van Milligan's site, which is very nice. Lots of good stuff that you can read about there. Great repository of knowledge. But we're going to start here and hopefully try to figure some of this stuff out. So most model rockets have a letter and then two numbers. Some of them also have a letter after that second number, so potentially four different things. 3 out of 4 of those things are potentially confusing. The one thing that is straightforward, and the one we're going to start with, is the last number. So that 5. And as you can see here, that number represents the delay timer. So after the rocket burns out, so when it is just coasting and putting out the black smoke, there's going to be 5 seconds for this rocket between that time and the time the ejection charge goes off. So that's pretty straightforward. It's a number. It represents seconds. That's all there is to know. Now, for a C, an Estes black powder C6, you have 3 choices. You could get a C3, a C5, or a C7, a ejection timer. So why would you want to use one of these? Well, the middle of the road is good for your average rocket. The longer number is good for light rockets if you are intent on launching them into the lower ionosphere, and the short number is for heavy rockets. The reason why is because when you launch a rocket, it goes like this. The ideal time for the parachute to pop is right at the top, because that's the point at which the rocket is traveling the slowest. In fact, it could possibly be stopped entirely if it went straight up and is going to come straight back down. That's when you want the parachute to come out. One, because totally cool, you got it up to the maximum height, but also because at the point up here, you have the least dynamic forces acting on the parachute. If you were to pop the chute, say, here or here, the rocket is traveling fairly quickly still, and you could shred the chute. I mean, they're not indestructible. If you're launching your average model rocket, it's plastic with kite string attached to it. Not hard to damage. So ideally, you want to get it right at the top. If you are using a kit, they should tell you what delay to use, and don't ignore it. Like, oh, well, I've got a bunch of C67s and I'm going to launch a heavy rocket. You might end up with the ejection charge going off after the rocket is in the ground. So don't mess around with that. If this is a scratch-built rocket, you're going to have to calculate for yourself what ejection timer you need. Now, for the most part, you can probably just guess and pick the middle one. So your average rocket will be perfectly fine with a C65. If it's heavy, you want a shorter. If it's lighter, you want a longer timer. So that's timer. By the way, if you are in the advanced section and you want to use a composite rocket, those frequently you assemble yourself, and you have to make the delay yourself by using a little drill tool, which is well beyond the scope of this video, but just something to be aware of. All right, next is the power rating. That is the letter that comes first. So this letter tells you, basically, it gives you a ballpark for how much power you're going to get, which is total impulse out of the motor. As this cool little diagram indicates, as you go up a letter, you essentially double its power. So 2 A's is the same as a B, 2 B's is the same as a C. And if you want to go back 2 steps, then a C is 4 times as powerful as an A. Here's the problem with that. It's not entirely true. It's a good ballpark idea, but it is not 100%. So just to illustrate that point, here's Estes's page. It's all his rocket motors. I'm going to click on just one at random, but I want to see this thing. This is a big performance chart that Estes publishes of all their motors with all the numbers you could possibly want to know. And if you look for the first nice green section here, at least for the first half of it, you'll notice that Well, here's an A, and it's 2.5 Newton seconds of total impulse. To go up to a B, it's now 5. Great, that's double. To go from a B to a C, double that is 10. That's great. And double 10 to get to a D is 20. Lovely. The problem is, once you get past a D for Estes black motors, or black powder motors, it doesn't hold true anymore. So double 20, you would think an E would be 40, but it's not. It's 30. This one's even a little bit weaker. These are both 24 millimeter motors. These two E's are 29 millimeter motors, but they too are only 33.68. They are not 40. They are weaker than that. So in reality, here is the true number, what the true letters mean. It's a range. We're not going to worry about this. The right column here is in a foot pound or something, and it's in imperial. We'll just use metric because it's a lot easier to deal with, and it's actually what the letters are calibrated in to begin with. So each letter is a range. And you will find, especially if you go over to composite motors, like I have some composite Ds, they are not 20 Newton seconds. They are like, I don't know, 18 or something. So while it is a good rule of thumb that each letter doubles the impulse, it doesn't necessarily. It does for Estes black powders up to a certain size, but once you get beyond the standard length Ds, then it is no longer true, which is a bummer, but that's okay. Now, last but not least, we've got this number in the middle. Apogee and Estes too call this the average thrust force. Some sites even go so far as to claim that this is a scientific number. It's 6 newtons. That is not true. It just isn't. And we can have a look over here at the formula or the data sheet again here, just to illustrate that point. So let's start with a B64, a great motor to be sure. It has 5 Newton seconds of total impulse, and it burns for 0.8 seconds. So to find the average, we would just divide those two. And if you do that, of course, you get, it's a little bit less. It's 25 over 4, which is 5.75. We get 5.75 newtons. And you could certainly argue, let's just divide that out. Yeah, 6.25. Sorry, did I do that right? Yeah, that's not right. It's 6.25. Yeah. Anyway, regardless of what the number is, it's not 6. It rounds down to 6. That's delightful, but it doesn't hold true for other ones. So here's an A103. This is a 13 millimeter motor. It has 2.5 Newton seconds of total impulse. It burns also 4.8 seconds. And it should be pretty obvious. This is half of that, so it's going to be half, right? So it should be 3.125. That is not 10. It's not even close to 10. So that 10 does not mean average. It can't. And this holds true for a lot of Estes models. So it is not the total or the average impulse. It's also not the maximum thrust. So in other videos, I've generally referred to that first number as being a representation of like the maximum thrust. And that's not literally true either. So an A103 is not putting out 10 newtons of maximum thrust. It's putting out 13, as it turns out. And in fact, most of these, not all of them, the number is bigger. So like the B64 is putting out 12 newtons of maximum thrust, not 6. You can, however, you can think of that number as a representation, but not an exact representation of the total thrust. So here is an an A3-4. It only puts out 6.8. So that's about half the total or the maximum thrust that this motor puts out, or that the 10 puts out. And it's a 3. So really what you can do with those numbers is make comparisons. Now, ultimately, the number is kind of like a trademark name. It doesn't really mean it. It's like Dr. Pepper's not really a doctor, right? It's not, that number doesn't represent an actual scientific fact. It's like a brand name to tell you what to expect. The bigger the number, the more you could think of it as the higher maximum thrust. Another way to think of it is it's going to get your rocket accelerating harder, faster. And that's actually valuable too. So why would you actually go, care about this? And the reason is the heavier your rocket, the harder the acceleration you need in order for it to be safe leaving the launch pad. So you need your rocket to be traveling at a decent clip while it's on the rod or the rail in order for the fins to actually do something to stabilize the rocket. If it's not traveling fast enough, you're out of luck. The fins won't do much. That's why we don't launch rockets just off the ground, because there's nothing stabilizing that first moment of flight. The fins don't do anything because it's traveling too slowly. So the heavier your rocket, the larger your number you want. And this is another place where if you're scratch building something, you really need software in order to tell you what the minimum number is for you to launch that first number for it to be stable. There are, of course, like paper and pencil ways you could do it, but boy, are they a pain. Just there's plenty of free software out there you could use. So that takes care of the numbers and letters in your average rocket. However, there are rockets that have another letter at the end. So for instance, let's go look at, oops, too far. Let's look at, it'd probably help if I had there we go. Let's look at mini motors. All these have a T at the end. Yeah, right there, it's a T. The T from Estes tells you that it is a mini motor. That's all it means, that it's 13 millimeters. Why they have them on the mini motors but not rocket motors of the other size, like why don't they have anything for the 29s? I don't know. Yeah. There are also, here's a P. The P stands for plug. That actually means something that might make sense. The P stands for plug. These don't have ejection charges. So they are for use in limited things. Estes sells these like racer things, and that's what they use them for. But they're also used for rocket gliders that you don't want an ejection charge. However, if you get into the realm of composite fuel, there frequently are letters at the end of those as well. And in that case, the letter tells you what kind of fuel the composite motor is made out of. And while there is some level of cosmetics here, so here's a list from Serious Rocketry, very nice and helpful. There are different letters you might see at the end, like a W or a T or an R, whatever. These tell you a few things. One is, and the main one is, what kind of color the smoke is. And while it is, it's cosmetic, it's pretty much cosmetic. The different letters also have different levels of specific impulse. For those of you who are hardcore into rocketry, they burn more efficiently is one way of thinking of it. That is reflected in both the letter and the first number of the rocket, though. So you don't have to worry like, oh, are you going to get the same results out of a W as a T? And you don't need to worry about that. You really don't. Also worth noting, some of these shoot little sparkly things out the back too, but chances are you probably don't want to use that because it's, as it says right here, it's high powered. You need a certification in order to do that. Plus, it potentially makes a mess. Anyway, so that covers hopefully all you could possibly want to know about the model rocketry, model rocket motor code. And yeah, thanks for listening. I'll see you another time.